Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about the case of missing 13-year-old James Yoblonski from Reedsburg, Wisconsin. So on June 12th, 2023, around 12:52 in the morning, James Yoblonski is seen on his home surveillance footage leaving his home with a backpack on, getting into the driver's seat of his father's van, and driving away. As you can see, this is that footage right here. A little over 8 hours later, James' father, Bill, wakes up. He starts getting ready for his day when he realizes that James is gone as well as his van. He immediately panics and files a missing persons report for his son, and authorities end up putting that stuff into the database, and they realize that they're actually one step ahead of him, as authorities actually found and tagged his van just a couple of hours prior in Baraboo Bluffs, parked on the side of Highway 12. It was reported that the van had been parked there sometime between 4:45 and 5 o'clock that morning. Now, about 100 yards away from the van in the wooded area off the side of the highway was a makeshift campsite. At this campsite, there was clothing found, and there was also personal hygiene products that were believed to have belonged to James. This is also the area where James' father's phone actually pinged. Now, James' father was not in this area. It was actually believed that James had taken his father Bill's phone with him when he went on the run because he was able to connect to it via hotspot. James had a phone, but it did not work off Wi-Fi. Cell phone records from Bill's phone did reveal that James had driven to the Wisconsin Dells, which is where his father owned a business. He then traveled to Lake Delton and then back to the area of his home before traveling south again to the area where he left the van. It was reported that James had actually driven to his father's work area 2 times, but what did he drive there for? It's believed that he actually drove there for a GUN. After James was reported missing, James' father, Bill, actually realized that he had a hand GUN that was missing from his business. They were not able to confirm, however, if James was the one who took this, because this was something that was accessible to many people who worked there, and it was also something that Bill did not use or check often, so it could have been missing for quite a while, but he didn't realize that it was missing until after James went missing. Once authorities realized that James could be armed, they ended up calling off the volunteer search for their safety, and the search ultimately scaled back for James. Investigators did say that close to the first makeshift campsite, they did find another one, but they were not able to positively confirm that James was at this specific one. They did say that the makeshift campsite did look similar to a drawing in one of James' survival books, so it is possible that he could have been here as well. They just don't have 100% proof that James was at this second campsite. 4 days later, though, the search was ultimately called off because of the rugged and tough terrain. It was very dangerous for authorities to be navigating through this terrain in this specific area, and they did not know if James was actually in there. Now, James's classmates were interviewed at his school. They stated that he was shy and that he was quiet, and they were actually surprised that he ran away. A couple of them did, however, say that James did express desire to go live off the grid at some point in his life, but they didn't think that he would actually do it. It was also around this time when investigators found out that James had a secret Snapchat behind his father's back. It was then where they were able to retrieve recorded videos from James' Snapchat prior to him going missing, where he said, quote, in the videos, "For everyone who cares about me, it's not their fault, it's no one's fault, it's my fault." There was also another video on his Snapchat that said something to the effect of, "I'm not processing anything, something has happened to my brain." A couple of months later, in August of 2023, authorities actually found that James was searching areas that were rural and off the grid in both Wisconsin and Minnesota, and he was doing this on both his dad's phone as well as his school devices. Authorities did investigate, and they ultimately said they have no evidence or anything to indicate that James ever made it to any of these rural areas that he had searched up. Now, after James' disappearance, his father Bill fell under very high public scrutiny. People were blaming him, thinking that he had something to do with his son's disappearance. However, law enforcement did say that he was administered several polygraph tests. He passed all of them, and they do not have any evidence to suggest that he was involved in his son's disappearance. And he also mortgaged his home so that he can put together a $10,000 reward for anyone who can come forth with information that will lead his son back to him. To this day, Bill is still advocating for his son. He drives around with his son's missing flyer on the back window of his van. Bill believes that James was talking to someone online and was ultimately lured out of the house. And while a lot of people do seem to agree with Bill, his father, a lot of people also believe that James ultimately did something to himself. But that leaves the question of, if he did do something to himself, where is he? Law enforcement looked through the wooded areas that James was believed believed to have last been in thoroughly, and they found no evidence to suggest that he had passed away. They also didn't find any evidence to suggest that he was continuing to walk through that terrain. So here we are years later, and we still don't know what happened to then 13-year-old James Yoblonski. Authorities are still taking in tips. If you have any information that could help lead to James Yoblonski, if you think you saw something, if you think you know something, contact the number on the screen. Please share this video. Hopefully with more new eyes looking at this case, we can bring about some answers as to what happened to him so that his father can either find him or get some sort of closure.